I want to start this video off today with a little bit of a video show and tell. So in front of me right now, I have three different video formats. Of the earliest type is quite simply your reel-to-reel quad tape system. Now, in reality, this is Ampex audio tape, but to someone who doesn't know different, the video tape looks exactly the same. It's very heavy and it's very large because it has to store a fair amount of video bandwidth, but the quality is okay for what it was. The tape machines, however, were quite large and editing was quite cumbersome. Moving on by a couple of decades, you'd come on to stuff like the video cassette. This is U-matic. U-matic hung around in the industry professionally for decades. The quality on it is a little bit better than you would get with Ampex Quad, but at the same time it was now far more portable, it was far more easy to use, and if you had to go and erase it and edit it, it was a lot easier because now you could embed timecode into here, so you could get frame-accurate recordings. But even U-matic had its shortcomings, and in television broadcast and other professional applications, video quality always matters. So if you can get more resolution and more bandwidth out of your video, you'll do exactly that. So I would say near the end of the life of analog television broadcast, this here was the standard professionally. This is Betacam SP. This is one of the larger running 90-minute tapes. But this here no longer does a composite video format like you found with the older tapes. I believe Ampex and U-matic were that. This could be done in RGB, which meant that the pictures were a lot cleaner, they were a lot clearer, you still had your embedded time code, and really there were so many flexible applications that you could use this for, there was really no problems with it. And there is no problem with using magnetic tape for storing video. But it's when you come to still images or repetitive use that things become somewhat problematic. An example of that would be, say, this audio cassette here. This contains background music that would play at a Kmart in 1985, let's say. This tape has maybe an hour of tape inside of it, and this is going to be playing and repeating and playing and repeating for months until you finally replace it with a new set of jingles and maybe some pre-recorded announcements. The problem is that magnetic tape can only be used so many times, and if you go to the Internet Archive, tapes like these have long since been digitized, and you can hear they sound like trash, even though they're in perfectly clean, perfectly adjusted, and perfectly usable tape machines to digitize them. The tapes themselves are just completely worn out. Another problem with magnetic tape, like I was mentioning with still images, is that you really should not be leaving these tapes on a single frame for any considerable period of time. By the time Betacam SP came out, there was a little bit of a solution to that, and that's simply if you stopped on any one frame, sure, it would synchronize and show you the exact frame, and the tape machine typically had a local memory so it could store all of that frame's information so you could see it without jitter or shake, and it could unload the tape so you didn't wear a spot in the tape and then, well, basically ruin it. But for the older Ampex type stuff, you were completely out of luck. And let's say you were storing large quantities of still images, hard drives were not big enough at the time. Like, you were stuck with tape. You could use film, but it's film. Necessarily by the 1990s, you didn't want to be storing a large quantity of still images on film. I mean, you could if you wanted to do 35mm. But let's say you had thousands of pictures, you needed something a little bit more advanced and a little bit more state-of-the-art to be storing it on. And another drawback of videotape is that it's not random access. Even if you did photograph everything into a single reel of tape or into a giant stack of film, you still need to figure out where exactly a particular image is located. You can index it, but you still gotta find it. Laserdisc solves a lot of the problems that professional videotape and production and broadcast has. The first is that technically a Laserdisc will never wear out because it's always being contacted by the laser. You're more likely to have the laser fail or the spindle motor seize up before you ever have a disc succumb to wear-related failures. Disc rot completely excluded, we aren't going to talk about that. But it's a composite video format, meaning that when a time when you really wanted to have like RGB, or the very limited component video, it's not really a broadcast-ready format. This is great for being used for training purposes or in the home, but for television, it's not really all that good. And that's kind of the problem. When you're rerunning commercials over and over again, something that doesn't really change, like TV stations or ID bumpers or something like that, where it becomes a problem. But you can't just go from a high-quality TV show to a low-quality composite TV ident and then back to a commercial, which may be of slightly better quality. You had to have something. But nonetheless, that's also the other big problem about Laserdiscs. They're not really recordable. I'm saying not really here because I can be confronted by several different things. The first one is that if you wanted to still have your own Laserdiscs made, you could have them made. If you wanted quantities of like a couple dozen or more, you could have a company go and pre-manufacture and press limited run discs for you. I always love it when I find these 3M discs because they look like they're other media that they were selling at the time. And these are Laserdiscs in their own right. They play in a Laserdisc player, but they're usually single-sided and they're just like a short run pressing. Normally these things have a lot of disc rot because they're very quickly and hastily assembled, but there's so many of these discs flying around. This one here is the anatomy of physiology of the heart. It's actually from BCIT. So BCIT probably paid several $1,000s to have this disc mastered up rather than have a videotape distributed around and stored in their archive. If, however, you still wanted to do a much more limited and, I'm assuming, cheaper run of discs, you could. There was one company that was really the master of Laserdisc recording, and that was the Optical Disc Corporation. And these were the very limited run discs that you could have manufactured. They're easy to identify because they have this pink or ruby display look to them. They're also highly reflective. Unfortunately, this one here has a pretty nasty crack in it, so I can't play it for you to show you what's on this one-off disc. But I actually know what's on this disc. So this one here was mastered by a company with the name of Magnetic North. It has a work order here, but it's called the Y Files. This disc came from Science World and was part of an interactive exhibit that was used for a limited time from like the late 90s and into the early 2000s. I just saw it before it closed out. And you were supposed to like touch the screen and there was like weird superimposed graphics. It was really cheesy, but considering how much revenue that a science center makes, being able to produce one or two discs like this didn't mean it was going to cost them a whole bunch of money. The recorders from the Optical Disc Corporation, that's another thing. So those are incredibly rare. I've only seen like one confirmed photograph of what these machines look like. It's a rack and a half of equipment, one containing a video display, the laser controls, and like video and audio modulation equipment for it. And then the other side's the actual disc recorder itself, which is an air-cushioned enclosure recording device. Like even if you walk around on the floor, the vibrations would interrupt the recording process. So it sits on an air cushion. These things must have been just astronomically expensive, and I have never seen one in person or in photographs in modern history. I'm assuming that when ODC was done with this equipment, or whoever had them last that had purchased them for eye-watering amounts, they're gone. There's none left. If anyone has like a modern photograph of one of these machines, even in a museum, I'd love to see it, because there's just nothing out there. Other companies, however, were also manufacturing their own optical laser disc formats that weren't necessarily compatible with the Laserdisc. If you stretched it and twisted its arm really hard, it may be able to produce a disc that was Laserdisc compatible, but other than that, it was just simply a 12-inch disc that was loading into a machine that allowed you to, in many ways, record in a RGB or component format, so you could solve the problem of what do you do with repeating commercials and video idents and storing them in a professional format. These recorders, re-recorders, and players are incredibly rare. The Pioneer type machine, I've only seen one photograph of an actual machine in modern history. I've seen the media show up once on eBay, and it was expensive. And the one time I saw a player for sale, I think the guy wanted like $6,000, and it did sell. But there's another type of recordable Laserdisc format that I seem to find a lot more often. Techmoan actually talked about it a couple years ago. I also have this technology as well. Where Pioneer called their rewritable video disc format LDRW, and the Optical Disc Corporation called theirs RLV, or Recordable Laser Video Disc, Sony called their format CRVdisc, or Component Recording Video. This is not going to be what you expect inside of here. I've only ever seen these in these foam and cardboard carrier boxes, but these do exist. This is the standard transport carrier. They're made out of plastic. And by the way, this isn't the only carrier for the disc. These here are massive. For comparison to the CRVdisc cartridge, this is a 12-inch optical disc. This is Sony's smallest format that I'm aware of, the mini disc. Yeah, it's quite a perspective there, isn't it? It's pretty crazy. But what you're looking at here is not a Laserdisc. I want to make that absolutely clear. This here does not record in composite. It doesn't have to. The component means that it can record either in your choice of component video or, more commonly, in RGB video. It provides you with approximately 34,000 frames individually, or about 24 minutes of recorded video per side with stereo audio. I think the reason that it's in this carrying case here is because it has a write protect tab. Now, you would assume that that means that you can erase this disc kind of like with the Pioneer system, but this is called worm, or write once, read many times. So once you record something onto this, it's stuck on there. But let's say because of the value of the discs, you don't want to be accidentally jumbling something up. When you go put this into a player, or more than likely if you go to use a recorder as a player, you can just simply move the write select tab over and it prevents you from recording to the discs at all. What does the disc look like inside of it? So that's the big thing. To demonstrate that to you, I will have to take off this U sticker here. And then I will just peel it off the back here. This will, at this point here, cause the shutter to start moving, but it's actually locked on this side here. That's fine. I'm going to take some screwdrivers and I'm going to start removing the screws that you see around the edges. And if you think we have all the screws out here out now, no, we don't, because there's two more screws on the end that we need to remove, and that will then release the shutter. There we go. Remove that off there. And you can already see the disc inside is blue. So that's why all of the CRVdisc branding is also in that color of blue, because the disc itself is blue. It's quite spectacular. Let me get these last two screws out of here. There we go. And I should just be able to lift this off, and there we go. So this is an actual CRVdisc uncovered outside of its enclosure. I'm going to be very careful when I'm picking this up. And what I find interesting is it actually has a label and a stamping to tell me what is side A and what is side B. That I'm aware of. CRVdisc was never available for recorders or players outside of this cartridge. It's not like DVD RAM. Likewise, if you take a recorded disc and you put it into a Laserdisc player, because it's not at all close to the Laserdisc format, it's not going to do anything. Sure damn well looks pretty though, at the very least. And while I have it opened up here, you can see how the write protect mechanism is just a slider right here. But we can also see the interlock that's also here that prevents me from opening the slider. You have to put it into the player first, and then it unlocks this gear and allows that to, whoops, well, okay, it's spring-loaded as well. That allows this whole rack here to slide sideways and then open the shutter up automatically. It's also, I believe, latched on this side. No, it's not. It's just a spring so that when you put it in there, it has something to help pop it out of the player when you're done. There's also these little tiny rubber or foam pads that are sitting in here. They have not degraded or melted, which is really nice. Okay, I don't want to put my fingerprints all over this here, so I'm going to close this up now. And we really need to talk about the recorder itself. Now, while I'm sure that an LVR 5000 is not something that's going to cost less than a couple tens of thousands of dollars, and we know that the media itself is probably going to cost several $100s on its own, the truth is that compared to all the other recordable video disc standards, it seems that CRVdisc is the most common thing to find. Go on eBay right now, and I'm pretty sure that you'll find either in recent history or even right now, you're going to find something CRVdisc related that's for sale, as opposed to all of the other formats and standards out there where you may find the odd disc or maybe some documentation, but that's more or less about it. These units here are also somewhat cheap as of making the recording of this video. This system right here, the LVR 5000 and the LVS 5000, is a paired set. I purchased this in 2014 from a guy who had been listing this on eBay as far back as 2011 for $350. He could not sell the damn thing at all. And I just simply said, okay, I've seen you've had this listed for a number of years. If I give you $100 and I drive down and pick this machine up, will you take that? And he said, sure. So I drove down to Kennewick, Washington, and picked this up along with a half-sized 19-inch rack. And ultimately what I found out is that he had purchased this surplus from the Hanford Nuclear Reserve. So this here is one example beyond television broadcasting of commercials and video bumpers. This would have been used in research purposes. So say you were taking large quantities of photographs while you were dealing with a Superfund cleanup, or using a remotely operated camera to look inside radioactive waste tanks. You could use this here to record that high quality, large volume of images onto these discs. Or if you needed archival quality video that couldn't be really changed or altered, you could record 24 minutes per side onto one of these discs. And I guess that's what the United States government was using. These particular units here were manufactured in September of 1991. I really don't have a price guide to this. I don't even have a full manual for this here. I just have the basic specifications that are available online. Now, like I was saying before, this is a paired set. If you ever see an LVR 5000 for sale and it's just this box, don't buy it if you intend to do anything with it. For reasons I'll show in a little bit here, this on its own is just the optical disc assembly. All the video processing, the handling, and all that jazz happens in the video processor box, which we'll get into a little bit as well. So now that we've taken apart one of the cartridges themselves, we're going to take apart the LVR 5000 to a degree. There's several things I want to show to you, but also, remember when Techmoan's video, he had that issue where he would go and insert a cartridge and it would just kind of go in so far and then it would just reject the disc immediately after? I was having the exact same problem as far back as when I got it in 2014, and I figured out what the problem was. So I'll explain that to you, because I don't believe in his video he actually gets to it directly. So here we go. Screwdriver's out, and I'm just going to move the processor and the disc away. So, the LVR 5000A, a non-standalone recording unit. This is primarily just the controls and the optics. We can see on the front here, we have our recording controls over here, our disc controls right here, and our interface controls right here, along with the videos display, and at the very bottom there, a connection for a wired remote control. This can use an infrared remote control if you wish. I don't have the remote control, which is fine. A lot of the functionality you need to operate one of these is available not only through the front panel on here, there's also a serial port on the back of the unit as well. So let's flip this around. It is a fairly deep device compared to other rack mount equipment. And on the back of the unit here, we do have a substantial heatsink. We also have our serial port, which is over here for our various control. We have a 9-pin remote control connection here. So you also have a remote that you could work with this for editing purposes if you so desire. And we have an hours meter that's sitting right here. This style here uses a little tiny cartridge fuse style looking thing with a little bubble that moves across as time progresses. This is currently at 2,500 hours or around that. So it saw some use and then was never used again. Or it's been serviced once already and that cartridge has been replaced and it's seen another 2,500 hours since its overhaul has occurred. But you'll also notice there's an absolute lack of other inputs and outputs here. I mean, we do have some BNC connectors here called MPX in and MPX out, as well as 36-pin in and 36-pin out. So the idea here is that the video processor really handles all of the audio and video inputs and outputs. And I think you can daisy chain multiple recorders together for reasons, again, without the documentation, I can't verify on this. Someone please say in the comments, because I'd love to see those manuals. So now, what was Techmoan's problem? So for that there, thankfully, I don't need the video processor to be attached. I'm just going to line this up here. So now you folks can see inside, as I've already popped all the screws off and removed the handles. And There we go. So this is the inside of the recording unit. It looks somewhat similar to a Laserdisc player, but it also has a lot more involved components. The actual transport frame right here is a nice piece of cast metal, and the actual optic assembly itself won't move anywhere simply because there's a servo and solenoid system which locks whenever it's not in use. So if you're wondering, like, can the optics be damaged on this while transporting it? The answer is no. As long as that latch goes into place, it locks the transport in place as well. So I need a power cable. So I'll plug that in there, and we'll turn the player on. There we go. There we go. So it's now initialized itself, and you may have heard that clunk clunk. That's when it unlocks the transport, brings it out, and then locks it back in again. So what his problem was is that, you see how I'm placing this here? These things are so visually pleasing, is that he'd put the cartridge in and it would immediately reject it. You know, just like that. But did anybody see what I was doing there? You can't really see it because it's off camera. Let's try that one more time. So he was suspecting that it was a greasing issue or something like that. The reality of this is that, let me turn it off and unplug it. If I spin the transport around, yep, there's a giant belt that lives right there. What's happening is that if it doesn't fully see itself seat with the switches, it assumes that there's been some sort of an error and just promptly ejects it right away. These belts that I've found, I've changed this belt once before already. If they get a little bit loose, what ends up happening is that it'll slip on that last couple of millimeters before it's fully seated, and then it just kind of fails out. This belt here I've already changed once before already. It's doing it again. So I've actually done kind of the no-no here. There's another smaller belt that's been wrapped around inside of this pulley just to kind of tighten up the main belt itself, which you can see is already starting to hold its shape a little bit. But that's the reason that he was having so many issues, is that he had a belt issue. Who would have guessed in this? Surprisingly, that's the only belt in this thing that I can find. The rest of it is gear-driven or it's voice coil servo. It's really nice. As for serviceability, oh man. Professional grade equipment, as you may expect, has professional grade serviceability. This is no exception. I've already taken the lid off, but I can't get access to any of the circuit boards. Well, that's not a problem at all. Here, let me see if I can prop it up on that for the moment. There's little tiny doors there and there, and you could just take a screwdriver in here. There goes one screw. Oh, missed it. There it is. There goes our other screw. I can pull the entire front panel off. There's 3 connectors that are hiding here, and each one is color-coded, so yellow, white, and black. You can't mix them up. And now I have access to the card cage retainer that's right here for these boards, and if I remove this assembly out of the way, I can get access to the rest of the boards underneath it as well. And of course, there's more boards in there. I can just simply go in from the underside as well. But, well, you get the idea. Extremely good serviceability. I'm sure the other reason you're here for this video is that you want to see the disc being loaded and spinning up inside the machine. All right, so I've got everything nicely lined up here. You can see the cartridge go in. You can see the cartridge as it's loaded in. I'm going to first turn on the machine. There we go. There it does its initialization. Now it's ready to accept the disc. So we'll take our cartridge, and right now I have it set into the write protect position, so nothing bad can happen, assuming that anything bad did happen. You put the cartridge in, you don't even load it in out of the way, you only go so far and then it takes care of the rest. So at this point here, it's spinning crazy fast. I heard the laser fire up, and at this point, I can't really do a whole heck of a lot else. Yeah, no, it's unhappy simply because it's not attached to the processor. There's really nothing that it can do at this point here. It needs to have the processing system attached to continue doing anything else. So let's do it one more time. There you go. There you go. And I can Reject the disc here as well. And if it's not already obvious, this is a double-sided disc format, 24 minutes per side. So we can go to the B side. There we go. And again, like until the bearings wear out, you can just have this locked on any one individual frame or repeating all you want. The disc itself is never going to wear out. I don't even see any visual signs of flaws on here like disc rot or anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to put this back together here and we're going to switch this out with the video processor. This is the other side of the 5000 series family, the LVS 5000A. This is purely a video processing unit for the recorder. It takes the analog audio and video signals, converts them into something that the disc can use, and going the backwards way, takes the video information and audio information on the disc and converts it back into some sort of standard audio and video format. On the front of the unit, it is otherwise fairly straightforward. It's actually a pretty lightweight box. But we have a headphone jack right here for local monitoring. We have our adjustments here for our audio recording and levels. We do have 2 analog volume meters. And we have this visual display right here. One side tells us the video input that we're currently using. As you can see, it's blacked out right now because we don't have the other half plugged in. So it's wildly confused at the moment. And as a result, it currently thinks our input mode is black and white with PAL 625 lines. But there are switches on the back to switch it over to NTSC 525 lines. Okay, so let me turn this off, unplug it, and we'll spin it around. And here is where all of our inputs are actually hiding on the machine. So, how do we start here? Right, so our adjustment switches for our video input information are all locked. There's little tiny plastic pieces here that prevent me from turning these switches into color black and white or NTSC PAL mode. So it is a multi-region machine. We have our inputs here, which is either component or RGB, depending on how we want to set our switches. We also have a composite black and white input, as well as reference video inputs. Our outputs consist again of RGB or components, if we wish to use that mode, and a separate video sync out. We also have a composite black and white signal output, and up here we have S-Video. Now, if you're wondering why a black and white option is available on the CRV disc format at all, you need to think about what exactly black and white and monochromatic video meant at all in the 1990s. And that is to say, when you were adding color to video resolutions this low, it did sometimes come with a measurable reduction in picture fidelity, just how finely focused you could get into things, because it was constantly trying to figure out, is this a color image or is it a black and white image? If you simply remove that entirely and just say this is a black and white image, then you're going to get much more finer details that you're going to be able to record, and then products like this make a whole hell of a lot more sense. If you spent like $30,000 for a complete CRV disc system, media, the display and all of that, it might not be entirely out of the universe of possibility that you also spent $100,000 for a Kodak Ekta Pro EM high-speed camera from around the same time. For our audio inputs and outputs, we have balanced XLR audio connections, and we also have, again, our 36-pin connector and our 2 MPX coax lines that connect the processor to the recorder. I'm assuming the reason why it's like that is that most of the lines are running over the 36-pin, but there's got to be at least 2 signals which can't handle that kind of wiring and need their own dedicated coaxial lines. Hence the MPX. I'm assuming that's shorthand for multiplex as opposed to MPX decoding and encoding on there. There's 2 fans in here as well, and there's also a pass-through here, so when you turn on the processor, you can also turn on the recorder at the exact same time. Now, inside of the unit, as I spin this around here, there we go. I've already taken the screws and the handles off, and we can see that indeed it is just a pile of circuit boards. The heatsink is now hiding on the inside of the unit here. By the way, if you're asking the question about serviceability, same thing as before, boards pull out the front. There we go. There's a giant anti-static shielding mat right here, but all the boards simply, you pull on these handles here and you can pull in each and every one of them out. Now it's interesting, these ones are labeled, so TB, EN, EP, which is actually a board we don't have in here, and AU. So I'm assuming the top one here is audio. EP is for expansion port, maybe? Some sort of expansion I don't seem to have. EN is going to be for video encoding, and TB is going to be our time-based system. Otherwise, there is not a lot else inside of this board. Everything's fancy, it's proprietary, it's pluggable. However, I do love, again, just how serviceable this is. If you've been asking the question about what do you do in the field if you have to do any sort of maintenance, this actually also came with the rail kit. So both the recorder and the processing unit are on rails, so I can grab the handles and you can slide it out of the front of the rack without having to like disconnect a bunch of stuff or de-rack anything. Obviously, you can take the front panel off without even opening the rack at all and just do a board swap simply right there. It's designed for high serviceability in an environment where there's no guarantees you can pull the equipment out. If you need to do a board swap, you can do a board swap right there. Now, like I'd said at the beginning of the video, even though CRV discs have on them a side A and a side B sticker, they are, for the most part, permanently stuck inside of these cartridges. That means that they are forever going to be stuck having to work with machines that have the mechanical transport to handle those cartridges. That I can tell, commercially speaking, Sony never sold anything that allowed you to use those raw discs. That also doesn't mean, however, that this machine right here is the only thing Sony released for CRV disc. As we had seen with Tecmone, he has the 6000 family of machine. Looks exactly the same, has all the same connectors, is functionally identical that I can tell. There was also the 3000 series machines, which took the video processor and the recorder and put them all together into one more compact box that's half the size of this. And then there's the 4000 series, which seems to have the same style of integrated processor and recorder, but there's also a version of the 4000 series that is playback only. Playback only versions of CRV disc makes a heck of a lot of sense. This is not anything new or exclusive just to optical disc. I've seen Umatic and Betacam decks that have the exact same thing, where it's a stripped down model, it cannot do any recording, and all you can do is pop in a tape, press play, and there you go. It's quite useful for media ingest. It's also great in the broadcast world for final output to the broadcast transmitter and what have you, simply because at no time is there a risk of some sort of a malfunction accidentally starting the record system and overwriting whatever was on your tape. The same applies here for CRV disc. You can take that CRV disc cartridge, go over to the playback only machine, press play, or you can have a computer operate the unit as is, and at no time is there a chance of you accidentally starting the record feature and doing something you don't want to do with the disc. Remember, it's write once, read many though, so you can't necessarily erase or overwrite the disc. You can only really just add to the disc. It was one of these play-only units that was brought to my attention a little while ago by a friend of mine. It had come up for sale in the Comox Valley, and it came with some extra CRV discs, but the labeling on them was quite peculiar. And this also comes down to the last example I can find for CRV disc and why such a product would exist at all: reusability. So I purchased that kit. I gave on the playback only unit to a friend because, well, I already have a playback and recording unit already. I don't need another one. I received out of this deal a carrying case for one disc that's pretty roughed up, and then I received a second black carrying case that contained the rest of the discs. This box and this one are both branded by Thompson Training and Simulation. This falls under their entertainment systems. So what does Thompson have to do with CRV disc? Well, you see, Thompson had this line of simulators called the Venturer. They're still available today. They kind of show up at like seedy attractions, public events, and stuff where you want to have this cool ride in it. The idea is that like you can either just kind of hop into it and it'll do the simulation, or if it's like at a mall or an arcade or something like that, you spend an eye-wateringly large amount of money. I've seen like £3 per ride. I've seen €4 per ride. It comes down to like $5 or $6 Canadian, which is unreasonable in my personal opinion. And it's like, it's the size of a golf cart or it's the size of a minivan, but you get into it, the doors close, there's a video projector on there, and there's speakers in it, and it's hydraulically articulated, so as you're bouncing around inside of this ride here, like, it's feeling like giving you the whole like simulation of whatever is happening on the screen. It finishes, says, thank you for riding with blah, 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 and then the doors open and out you go again. So there has to be a way to get that video to be played on cue, but also repeatedly without wearing out some sort of a videotape. And these systems are old enough, it goes back into the early 90s, that videotape makes no practical sense at all, as well as there's no way you're going to be doing with hard disk storage either. It's actually quite funny. LGR did a video reflecting on Computer Chronicles at CES in 1993, and he gets completely boggled by one of these Voyager units that's set up and bouncing around over at Sony's booth.
Why not develop a new music format that has the benefits of both the cassette and the CD? It has the compact size.
What the heck's going on behind him? There's some chaos back there. Look at this motion rig.
It's funny that it's happening over at Sony's booth, because I can bet you good money that behind the experience that's going on right inside those doors is going to be a CRVdisc playback unit that's being controlled over the serial port from a computer. So I have several different titles here. They're all kind of interesting. I've looked at every single one of them. And so this particular disc here has Astro Canyon Coaster and Glacier Run. The other side has Smash Factory. This disc here has what's called Castrol Car Rally, and the other side here is blank for reasons I'll explain in a couple of minutes here. This dark cartridge over here, if I open this one up, there we go. This has Fly with the Snowbirds. Well, it was the Comox Valley, so I'm pretty sure this came out of a simulator that was showing that off. And on the other side of it, it's the same thing, Fly with the Snowbirds, at frame 11940 to 19629. Now, it's interesting. You remember how in Tecmon's video, the video did not start right at the very beginning of the disc? The same applies for all of these cartridges as well. You have to go to pre-programmed select locations for the ride to run. Notice the slits here on either side of this carrier. The same thing before I quickly close this here, you can actually see it as well. There's pockets here for 3.5-inch floppy disks. Why do I say 3.5-inch floppy disks? Well, because I found the shutter window for a verbatim disk hanging out inside of this here. So the idea is that you bought your Venturer, and in this case here, I'm pretty sure it was a Venturer S2 system, which is a little bit smaller, a little bit more portable. They've all at this point here been upgraded to like hard disk video playback and much more advanced systems, but in the beginning, I'm 100% certain they were all running CRVdisc. So you would get your Venturer, you would like receive a form of what kind of rides would you like and what kind of adventures do you want to have programmed onto your machine. So you'd select them, you'd pay your licensing for them, and what they would do is that they would take a CRV disc, and they had allocations for like certain areas within the available frames of the disc that they would program or record the adventure into. These would then also be programmed and synchronized with the floppy disk, which contained all the routines for the hydraulics and the sounds and the effects, and that would be sent off to you. Now, you could continue to use that cartridge all you want, and that means that it probably cost you the money of the cartridge plus the licensing. But if you wanted to change the attractions that you had in your Venturer, you didn't need to change the cartridge. You just had to go and have the blank sections, which you already knew, send it back with a sheet saying, I'd like to also add this one and this one and this one, and they would update the disc with the new adventures, and they'd send you back an updated floppy disk, which is again calibrated and synchronized to those start and stop points on the disc, and away you went. Now, this is going to be the fun part, because I want to try and demonstrate some of these to you. Now, thankfully, a bunch of these rides are already available on YouTube. I've been trying to put them up here in the corner. If you don't see them up there, I'm linking to them down below in the description. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work out here because of two things. One, I find that when you redistribute these kinds of rides and stuff, when it comes to like carnivals and stuff like that, they get kind of stingy over copyright, so that might not be removed. But the other thing I need to point out is that to get the CRVdisc system set up here is a total pain in the ass. Now that cut there was instantaneous for you, but it's been a week of me fighting with all of my equipment to get this to properly like record and be ready for this final take on the video. What you're going to notice here is some continuity breaks, and I think the first and most obvious one here is that the video display that I love so much, this professional broadcast Panasonic monitor, has developed a vertical red stripe in the picture. You'll notice when we're playing back the video, it's not there. That's because that's all B-roll, okay? Don't worry. This other Panasonic that I have hiding back over here, that one's got a green stripe on it. It's annoying as hell. This thing here still has weird belt issues with that one belt because, sure, whatever. It's an old belt that I changed 10 years ago and it's going bad again. And it has capacitor issues. So if you try and use it cold, it doesn't work. If you run it for like 5 hours, it begins to act up and do stupid things with the video sync, whatever. Now I'm going to turn off the light back here so you can see the screen a little bit. And by the way, in that week there while I was fighting things, I was able to successfully digitize all the videos on these discs, and I threw them up onto YouTube to do a content ID test. And I guess, okay, I just said that it's going to be kind of stingy on the copyright here. It seems fine for the sake of this video that I can be able to just overlay some of the video content and the audio, and it's not immediately going to get whacked. So we're going to try that here. So side A contains 2 titles. Now, it's worth pointing out with these discs, it's visually pleasing. When you open the slider, you would see that there's nothing, video data, nothing, video data, and then nothing. It's optically different. You see these like circular, darker blue bands where there's material recorded on the discs. So let's put the first disc in here. Okay, now with every single disc here, the Venturer needs to be adjusted every single time you transport it. So let this lock, there we go. And so with the first couple of frames here on the disc, you have various test patterns, alignments, convergence controls, because it probably has a projection TV that's hiding inside of the Venturer that you have to adjust every time you've moved it and thereby shaking it around. So this allows you to do all those alignments there, and then gives you a test pattern. It gives you an audible test tone at the same time. So now let's key in our first simulation, Glacier Run. And it's computer-generated graphics as you'd expect from the mid-90s. So search 21438, and off we go.
Welcome to the Venturer Simulator. Please keep your arms away from the doors and remain seated at all times. For your security, there are safety rails in front of you and an emergency stop button above your head. Hold on tight. You're in for a truly moving experience. Thank you for riding with us today. Please remain in your seat until the door is fully open. There are many other exciting Venturer experiences. Join us again soon. And remember, in Venturer, dreams can come true.
This is delightfully cheesy stuff, I want to point out. Like, it's great, but like snowmobile rides or slide rides are one easy way to use a simulator. The other one that's also, well, pretty easy to do is roller coasters. Again, with computer graphics. Apparently there was live action versions as well. I don't have that. For this one, Astro Canyon Coaster starts at frame 36,210. So search 36210, and off we go.
Welcome to the Venturer Simulator. dreams can come true.
And again, this is delightfully cheesy, I might add. So those were the two titles on that side of the disc. There is no automatic rotation, obviously. So we're going to take this out. We're going to flip the physical disc over, and I'll put it back in again. There we go. So there's only one title on this side here. And like I said before, not only can we do computer graphics with these simulations, we can do live action. Now, the live action can be strap a camera in front of whatever it is and just do that, or it could be kind of like this choreographed miniature live action thing. Smash Factory is that example there, and we have it on this side starting at frame 20,928. 20928, 20928, there we go, and
Welcome to the Ventura Simulator.
Now, normally we'd start the tour through the doors on the left here, but I don't think we're going that way today. Oh, look, our resident orangutans. Hi, fellas, just wave and say hello. How you doing? Now, this is where the real tour begins. Oh, hello, officer. Hey, good afternoon, sir. Oh, hi, people. Oh, sorry, lady. Okay, here we go. Oh, sorry. We better stop. Please don't leave your seats till we come to a complete and final stop. Oh, thanks for flying. If you excuse me, I gotta find another car. You gentlemen have a problem in there?
that was really fun. So, that was one type of live action simulation that could be done. The other two discs have their own type of live action simulations that we can do as well. Like I said before, these discs all came from the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island. It is by no coincidence that CFB Comox is in the Comox Valley. And whose home base is Comox, Canadian Forces Base, Comox in fact? Why, the Snowbirds. This next disc here, I'm just going to eject this one here, let that spin down, is labeled Snowbird. But specifically here, it's a custom simulation for the Venturer that starts off in French for some reason, that is called Fly with the Snowbirds. And this is the other type of live action simulation, which is having a camera strapped to the front of something. So we'll let that spin up there. And I said that that would start at frame 11,940. So we'll wait for that to lock. There we go. Search 11940. And off we go.
Éloignez vos bras de la fermeture des portes et restez assis sur votre siège. Pour votre sécurité, vous trouverez une barre devant vous et un bouton d'arrêt d'urgence au-dessus de votre tête.
Hi, I'm Major Steve Hill, Commanding Officer of Canada's jet aerobatic team, the Snowbirds. It's one thing to see our show from the ground, but through the magic of Venture simulators, you get to see it from the cockpit firsthand. Keep your hands away from the doors at all times, hold on to the rail in front of you, and in case of emergency, there's a stop button overhead. Hang on and have a great ride.
Solos, roll, now. Solos, pull, now. 5.5 G, Cuban reverse. Over the top. Snowbirds, roll, now. Smoke now. Pulling up again, 3.5 G. Over the top. Little pirouette. Touching down. Good show, guys. Individual turn in and shutdown.
The Snowbirds, ambassadors for the Smart Risk Foundation, encourage the prevention of injuries by making smart risk choices. Please remain in your seat until the simulator is stationary and the doors are fully open.
So that one was really cool. It's strange though, you can see that it was edited together in parts. I do kind of wonder if this was like originally some sort of like larger IMAX film or something like that, or something that was kind of like edited down and converted for use inside of a Venturer simulator. Really neat. Both sides of the disc, by the way, are recorded in exactly the same locations. So that means is that it doesn't matter which way you put the disc into the CRV disc player, it will always be guaranteed that the simulation will sync up and work at the exact same time. The last disc I'm going to deal with here, I never thought I'd have so many CRV discs stacked around here. Sure, let's put them down here for the moment. The last one here, side B is blank, so there's nothing on it. Side A has just one thing. It's another camera-mounted live-action simulation called Castrol Car Rally. This seems like something that was custom recorded for like, I don't know, like a Castrol sales booth at some sort of like event or like a car show or something like that. It would have cost a ton of money, but at the end of the day, they already bought the disc. If they wanted to have actual rides put onto it, they can just flip the disc over and then just record onto that, and boom, the simulator is now just a regular Venturer. So I'll put that in. So for this one here, it doesn't start thousands of frames in, it starts at frame 240. So search 240, enter, and away we go.
Welcome to the Castrol Simulator. Please keep your arms away from the doors and remain seated at all times. For your security, there are safety rails in front of you and an emergency stop button above your head.
I'm Juha Kankkunen. Now you are going to have a drive of your life with me.
1, go. 30, keep right over crest. 30, water splash to medium left. 50, crest and long absolute left to crest. 50, and keep right to turn long medium left. 30, long K left and medium right, and medium left tightens. And caution long K right, and crest the band left narrows to narrow K on medium right. And very long medium left. 100. Very long K right. Okay.
Thank you for riding the Castrol Simulator.
Now, notice with that one there that the Venturer branding and all of the stuff that we've seen before with all of the other simulations isn't there. This one's been specifically rebranded by Castrol. So there is no exclusivity by Venturer to have only their simulations playing on their rides. I guess if you had the money and you wanted to make your own custom simulations, Castrol, for example, and the Snowbirds being another example, you could have them ordered up and made, and they would design them to specification. And I'm assuming Castrol just had, kind of like how we saw with Sony in LGR's video, this like custom skinned Venturer that you could drag around to shows. So let's eject that disc out of there. And by the way, you may have also asked questions regarding what was going on in the processor here. So the volume controls do actually, well, these ones here are only specifically for setting the level for whatever you're recording. And because the red lights weren't on, we obviously aren't recording. But they do also show volume level when you're playing back. These indicators right here don't necessarily change because they're completely reliant on those switches that we showed on the back. So right now it's set in color mode, NTSC 525 lines, input YRB, and our output is YRB and composite. I think it's kind of looking at the S-video there and assuming that, yeah, there is no S-video indicator here. It's either YRB, RGB, or composite, and that's when it's seeing the video display that's hiding back over here. So that is my sample of CRV discs here. I am not going to record on any of these here for two reasons. One, These discs, while as common as they seem to be, are still, I don't want to waste anything on it right now. And two, without recapping this, I strongly suspect that we may run into some sort of recording or errors regarding mastering, and I don't want to ruin one of my simulation discs or my nice new clean and never used CRV disc, which has been, well, in excellent condition. All of these discs here, even though they have sleeves on them, I found, they all were full of dust. And it showed signs of crazy laser rot on them, but really it was just the discs were that dirty. Once I cleaned them, as you saw in the videos there, it looks a lot better than what it was. I don't think I have any examples of what it looked like before. So in my opinion, I do believe that the Venturer simulations I showed you today are probably the best example CRVdisc had going for it, next to archival storage of video and still images in large volume. Think about it. These simulators could not exist in any other way in the 1990s without having either a degradation of quality or using a tape system, which after just a couple dozen uses, probably per day, you would have to change the tape. And like I was saying at the very beginning of this video, CRVdisc solved that problem, albeit not totally cost effectively, for someone who wants higher quality than Laserdisc, but still the retention of the random access and reusability of the format as a professional media. And that's great for me simply because I can find the discs and the cartridges and the players, and even though no one else has wanted to make a video about this, this gave me ample time to do my research here, find the equipment, and get most of my hardware working as good as it could be to make this video here, to supplement what is there on CRVdisc and to try and answer some questions. Primarily that CRVdisc is not Laserdisc compatible. It's a 12-inch media. This was not also the only 12-inch media that Sony was distributing at this time. There was a data version of this as well. It looks very similar, but I think we've had enough for this video here. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video on CRVdisc. I hope you've enjoyed watching all of these Thomson Venturer simulations. And until next time, have a good one.